One of the most requested topics on the channel is camping stories. You guys have sent in tons of your allegedly true creepy encounters while out camping. These stories will truly freak you out, as they definitely had me looking over my shoulder while recording them. If you would like to share your story on a future video, be sure to submit yours at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. Now, let us dive into these allegedly true, creepy experiences while camping deep in the woods. There are some weird things that went on at my campsite throughout the years. I live in Oregon and I spend as much time in the summer camping as much as I can. I have this site that I really like that's on a mountain. I've been going there to interact with some Sasquatches that live there in the summer. The ones that come to my camp are the young ones. The adults hardly come up, but I can hear them smashing boulders in the creek. My first time there, I was with a friend of mine. I always tired out before he did, so I was asleep in the tent when I heard him say my name and told me to wake up. He said there are lights out there. I opened my eyes and yes, it was bright. I went back to sleep. He woke me up in a more urgent tone shortly after. Get up, you gotta see this. I told him, yeah, I see the lights, they're bright, okay. I was falling back asleep before my sentence was finished. After that, I remember him saying, it's still here, just over the trees. It's just sitting here. I figured he thought we were in danger or he was scared and something like that. I never did get up though, but it made me think, well, wasn't that something? Fast forward to the next summer. I was getting used to hearing the Sasquatches at the creek, and this may have been one of the first times they were actually in my camp when I was awake for it. After listening to footsteps, bipedal ones walk up to my tent, I was so excited. Then I heard a sound that horrified me. Clicking. Have you ever seen that movie Signs? That is what it sounded like. I immediately said the first thing that popped in my head. No aliens. I don't like aliens. You know what? The clicking changed to the sounds of water in the babbling brook right away. I'm not even kidding. I couldn't believe it myself. So I thought to myself, that was rather weird, and I let it go. The next time I thought of aliens again, I was out there camping in the rain. I was waking up. On the inside of my tent, it was lit up bright for some reason. I almost went back to sleep before thinking, wait a minute, who's shining a light bright enough to light up the inside of my tent? There was no one camped anywhere around here. Sasquatch don't use lights, and by this time I was fully awake. The light was off, but I had to get up and check the premises anyway. Not until I stepped outside my tent did I realize how dark it really was outside. It was pouring down rain, but I had tarps all above my tent. So what the hell? Another small thing to just think, about and continue on. So now comes last summer. Every night I'm camping around, I turn on my Zoom 2000 recorder and record what goes on in my camp while I sleep. This is the time Sasquatches come around. I generally review the recordings in the winter, as there's more to listen to. One morning, I found my recorder set to record in WAV format rather than MP3. I always record in MP3 to save space on that little memory chip. There is a switch on the back of the recorder to turn it from WAV to MP3. So after I got home and brought it on the computer, I noticed that there was one at exactly 1 hour and 2 minutes in. At first, I was like, what the heck is going on here? I was camping alone, so it made me think, who could have possibly changed this? I start listening to the first WAV. An hour through it, I'm listening carefully past the wind blowing, past the creek flowing, and my breathing. I'm listening for footsteps, clinks of things in my kitchen, etc., when all of a sudden in the recording, I let out this terrifying, blood-curdling scream. It almost made me scream listening to it back. I'm almost afraid to listen further, but I must know what happens next. Next thing I say on the recording is, "Oh, it's okay. I'm just going out to pee." So, who did I say this to? I don't know. I don't remember any of it. I am not one to sleepwalk or have night terrors or anything. So now what the hell could be the answer? I listened to the beginning of the one MP3 recording and it starts out with me sleeping, the second it turns on. I then hear the zipper and that's it. I would never camp alone. Well, at this point anyway. There are too many missing people and this was so weird that I feel lucky that I'm not missing. Everyone watch out when out in the wilds. It's best not to go alone. Stranger things than this are happening everywhere. I'm a primary school graduate in Thailand, meaning I'm moving up to high school. This story takes place in my elementary school. It was a scout camp and we had to stay there for 3 days and 2 nights. On our second day, it rained heavily, so we had to move to our school to sleep there instead of sleeping at the camp. We carried what's left of our stuff and go back to the camp again to take any remaining belongings. A little bit of backstory about this school. It was built on an abandoned hospital in 1936, which of course probably has a lot of deaths stored in it. There was even a murder involving a couple. I don't know the full details yet, so I'll just leave it at that. That evening, we were in the large auditorium of our school. Our scout leaders were just putting on a show and it was still raining. We couldn't hear much of what they were saying because of the rain, unfortunately. So, we just started talking. After the show, the school just went silent with the exception of rain. I and my friend were just joking around about ghosts while walking up to our room to change the clothes after the shower. All of a sudden, we hear this screech from down below on floor 1. Note that we were on floor 5 of the building. We just figured that some kids were messing around with each other or something of the like. That night, I go to the bathroom with my friend. The show ended pretty late and we got to bed at around 1 a.m. So when I woke up, my friend went to go to the bathroom with me. He was not happy. He took a flashlight and we walked to our school bathroom, which was down on the 4th floor at the end of the hallway of the floor. While we were walking, we were hearing footsteps that just weren't ours. We started to panic and decided to run. On our way back, we couldn't hear the footsteps anymore, so we just walked and calmed down a bit. While we were walking back to our room, we see this figure that looked like a lady. A really tall lady. We figured that a teacher from the high school section of our school must be here late or something. We didn't know, and we prepared our ears for the lecture she was going to give us. As we walked closer though, we immediately realized that the lady was floating. My friend scrubbed his eyes and so did I. The lady was definitely floating and is now coming toward us. She was levitating about 5 inches off of the ground. Her head chopped open, but not all the way. Like somebody used a machete to cut a log of wood and it got stuck. We immediately bolted for the intersection between the hallways with the second set of stairs and bolted it back to our room once we got back to floor 5. The scout leader that was patrolling the classroom, the one that gave us permission to go to the bathroom, immediately lectured us for running and probably waking up a lot of students. He pushed us back into the room, and the next morning we told our friends, but no one believed us. I'm still scared by this, of course. I moved out of that school this year, so I guess I'll forget about it later on. But this has made me wary of camping, even out in the woods. I have been in a relationship for about a year now with my girlfriend, who I will call C for the purposes of this story. She's an international student here to pursue a master's degree. Being from overseas, she missed her family dearly and wanted to fly back for a few weeks to see them. This meant she would miss Christmas and New Year's with me, so she wanted to do something special before she flew back. I decided, right then and there, to take her camping. We had difficulty choosing a place, and I was surprised that C had agreed in the first place, since she's a clean freak and has never spent a night outdoors. I, on the other hand, have been on dozens of camping trips, and I'm a very experienced outdoorsman if I do say so myself. We decided to go to Death Valley because I'd never been there. Winter also seemed to be the best time to go, and C thought I had a cool name. The weather seemed to be great, and we quickly prepared all the things we needed for our trip. We left nice and early to go to Death Valley and arrived around noon. The scenery was beautiful. Death Valley seemed to have every kind of possible desert landscape in one small area. We would see nothing but bleak stone mountains with jagged tooth-like stone outcroppings in one moment, but round a bend to be treated to a vast expanse of desert plains on the next turn. Yet another turn revealed a landscape dotted with desert vegetation, while yet another let us glimpse treacherous cliffs within winding canyon roads. There were blue, green, red, orange, yellow, gray, and black rocks. Overall, it was very beautiful. Although the drive took nearly 5 hours, it felt like no time at all since we were enjoying the scenery so much. Death Valley is really a remarkable place. Pleasantly surprised me, and all I expected was a mono-colored wilderness of sand and sun-bleached stones. I taught C how to pitch a tent, build a fire, split wood, carve branches for roasting marshmallows, and to cook over a wood fire. After I made a pizza over the fire, we had our late lunch. We went hiking. Our campsite was off of one of the more remote areas of the valley, between two mountainous areas. A cool breeze blew through it, and the place was as quiet as the grave. There were perhaps 3 other groups camping in the area in our vicinity near the bathroom, but the individual campsites were kind of empty. They were also a couple 100 feet away from each other, so it wasn't a big deal. I had chosen a spot overlooking the main road, and we could see wildlife below us, mostly jackrabbits, field mice, ravens, and other birds. I saw a bat, which probably came out of a nearby cave in the mountainous cliff, and heard other campers talking about a kit fox that had wandered curiously close to their camp. By late afternoon, I had grown unusually cold. Despite the weather reports telling me it was the same temperature as back home, I was freezing for whatever reason. Perhaps it was the cold dryness of the valley air, but the cold easily pierced through my 3 layers of clothing and seemed to cut straight down to the bone. I was cold despite moving around a lot in our campsite and having just returned with C from hiking, so I made a big pot of soup while our dinner cooked in the embers near the fire. I had made foil packets with hamburger steak, mushroom gravy, and vegetables, using up the leftover pizza ingredients as well. We scarfed down the dinner, gathered some large fallen branches to supplement our cords of firewood, and retired into the tent by 8 o'clock in the evening. Just before we went into the tent, C shouted out to me in the dark that there was a rider on a horse coming down the hilly terrain in the camping area. She sounded quite awed by the sight, and though it was so cool. I also responded to her by turning my head toward the spot in the campsite she referred to, which could not have taken more than 2 seconds. But all I saw was a very tall man near the smoky campfire of another site coming down the hill. He was so bundled up against the biting cold in a long brown blanket and hoodie that I could not see his face. His blanket trailed down near his feet as he took short, stiff, shuffling steps toward the bathroom. His gait was unusual, but I attributed it to him being very cold, as I was. As he walked through the site toward the bathroom, I saw his hooded head turn toward me. He was carrying a flashlight, but I could not see his face. A few seconds later, he disappeared from sight near the bathroom. C and I entered the tent and tried to go to sleep. I wanted to tell scary stories, but she was too scared to want to hear any of them. Then I thought of the man and asked her where she saw the rider supposedly on a horse. I had not seen any horse, just the bundled up man with a flashlight. C gave a completely different account of the situation. She claimed she saw a person with a flashlight coming down the hill, but that he was bobbing up and down and traveling far faster than a person would ordinarily walk. As he went through the darkness of my campsite, she saw that he was on a black horse and he had called out to me. I thought this was strange because I saw no horse and just saw a man. it would not have been possible for me to miss a horse coming down the hill, and when she had called out, I didn't take long to turn around in response in her voice. The area was so quiet I would have noticed a rider if there was one anyway. I tried to tell C that she had to have been mistaken, but she insisted she saw a man on a black horse. She described the shape of the horse's head and the tan color of the harness. I chalked it up to some misunderstanding and cocooned myself into the blankets. Maybe she was talking about someone further up on the hilly campsite and I had simply looked in the wrong direction. Nonetheless, I told her what I saw and I thought that it was kind of weird, but C seemed very frightened for some reason. She said there was just one man and didn't want to listen anymore, and we forgot about it and went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to C nudging me awake and telling me she thought someone was trying to get into our tent. My eyes shot open and I looked all about the tent and zippered entrance. It was just the wind. If someone had been at the tent flap, I would have been able to see their shadow against the campfire's light. I grabbed my machete, poked my head outside to confirm nobody was there, and I found I was right. The campsite was dead silent. I thought I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel outside a few times later, but I was already drifting back to sleep, lulled into unconsciousness by the fierce cold. When C and I woke up, we packed our things and spent the rest of the day visiting the areas in the Death Valley area. In the evening, I drove us back to civilization. Along the way on a desolate stretch of dark highway, C claimed she saw a rider on a horse going the direction we were driving. I didn't see much, and casually mentioned the night before, which almost brought C to tears. According to C, she had put more wood on the fire, gone to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and had an unsettling feeling that she was being watched or followed when she was returning to the tent. She had looked back to see a tall man near the bathroom from where she had just come. Instinctively frightened, she ran back to the tent and went inside. She claims that she saw the shadow of half a man cast on our tent. Half a man as in half a man lengthwise with one arm, and half a head, and half a body, and one leg. She then heard our tent moving and heard the tinkering of the zipper on our tent, whereupon she had awoken me thinking someone was trying to get in. I had seen no shadow and attributed the tent noises to the wind. C said the shadow was gone by the time I woke up, but that she did hear footsteps later around when she said that I was falling asleep. The part about the footsteps was eerie since I was pretty sure I heard footsteps too. Still, I tried to be logical and told her it was probably someone from another camp going to the restroom. Come to think of it, I never did see the tall man go back up the hill to where his camp would have been. I didn't say much to C since I didn't want to freak her out any more than she already was. We were out of Death Valley and back in civilization anyways. We spent the day after hanging out with C's friends and packing up the rest of her luggage. I took her to the airport in Los Angeles and after we had dinner, sent her off. The airport was very crowded, not unusual since it was almost Christmas. Still, I noticed a tall man lingering a few meters behind us as we made our way through the crowd. He maintained about the same distance, but since I am very alert, I could tell he was following us. The man was wearing a brown blanket, tattered clothes, with a hood tightly drawn about his face, and boots as though he was very cold, walking with an awkward gait like an arthritic in a blizzard. The interior of the airport was quite warm and I was feeling fine in my t-shirt and thin sweater. The man's worn garments contrasted sharply with those donned by most of the travelers. I could see his lips but not the rest of his face, and I made no effort to get a clear look since I did not want him to notice me looking at him. Something about him made me feel very uneasy. I don't know what it was. That guy just really freaked me out, and I don't think I'll ever really get over it. I don't know what this guy could have been. I don't know. It confuses me. Some people said it was like a skinwalker or something like that, but I don't really think so because it doesn't really seem to correlate with what they do. My encounter just doesn't make sense to be a skinwalker encounter. But if one of you guys may know something more of what followed us back from our camping trip, I'd love to know. This takes place about 2 years ago. A few friends and I were going camping in some woods near my house to get levered and also try some new bud we managed to steal off my friend's dad. We had never smoked before, so we were all pretty excited. Everyone was pretty drunk. I think there were 4 of us and we were all about 15 years old. We were enjoying our night. We rolled a very crappy spliff and smoked it. We were all pretty giddy. I hadn't even smoked a cig before, so I just ended up coughing and spluttering and not really feeling it. But meh, I was drunk. Anyways, you get the idea. A bunch of kids way past being sober, pitch darkness save for a little campfire we managed to pull together. Then, as we're all sat there chatting away, we hear a scream in the near distance. I think at first we really weren't sure if we heard it or if we just imagined it. We were all looking at each other a bit spooked when we hear yet another scream. We're all pretty freaked out by this point. This scream wasn't a giddy, playful scream. It was terrifying, like top of the lungs screaming, like genuine pain and terror. We were all freaking out at this point. What if someone was hurt? We didn't know what to do. We started breaking into arguments and we didn't know what to do. Being dumb kids, being high and in the woods, what did you think we were gonna do? Go and try to find the scary stuff, or just hide like a bunch of babies? Well, this continues for a while. Just intermittent screaming and us freaking out until at some point, one of my mates, Max, just really goes, F this, grabs one of the only torches and sprints off into the darkness back towards my house. The rest of us just kind of look at each other for a second wordlessly, and then we just decided to leg it behind him as well. Eventually, we reach my house, which isn't too far away from where we were camping. But these god-dang screams were so loud we can literally hear them from my house. I reach my front door banging on it, begging to be let in, but my brother answers, who put it bluntly, he's kind of a dick. He kind of just tells us to screw off and then says he can't hear any screaming and to not knock on the door again, because everyone's going to bed. We debate what to do for a bit before realizing we can't just leave our stuff in the woods. We decide to do a lap around my estate to calm our nerves and then go back and just chill and go back to sleep. The screaming was subsided by this point. As we reached the top of the estate, we were walking in the middle of the street kind of nervously laughing off what had happened. Then we noticed this guy in a black hoodie coming towards us. A bit freaked out, but hey, no biggie. He passes by us, but as he passes, he turns on his heel in one swift motion and just carries on walking backwards down the hill, staring at us as he goes down. Now this royally freaked us out. He stops beside this bush and kinda just sidesteps so he's half hidden behind it, just watching us. We're just stood there whispering to each other and looking at him, thoroughly creeped out at this point. Then this guy sidesteps again and starts speed walking towards us. We instantly scream in unison and sprint off into the night. We end up running all the way to town center, which is about 2 miles away, just absolutely crapping ourselves the entire way, until we finally come back to my house and end up trying to whisper shout through the letterbox to wake my dad up for about an hour, till someone finally let us in. So yeah, that was an experience. Sorry it's probably not the most spooky story you've ever read, but I just wanted to share this creepy encounter before the details vanished from my memory. I still kinda wonder to this day, what exactly happened that night? Did someone just slip and hurt themselves? Was that dude yet another common smackhead? Who knows? Before I go into probably the scariest experience of my life, you will need a bit of context and background information to fill in the holes. I am a 21-year-old male from the southern area of a Midwestern state. For personal reasons I clarified where, but I will say my town, which is more of a community, is one you're more than likely not to find on a map anytime soon. A bit of a heads up, I am a gay male, as my boyfriend will have his part behind what happened over the most terrifying weekend of my life. You will also need to understand that due to a freak accident, I ended up with 13 surgeries on my left leg and foot. It has been left impaired to the point of not being able to run, jump, or hardly walk at times for that matter. This all took place over the summer of 2017. I had just turned 21, and as a celebration, my boyfriend, who we will call Julian in this for his own privacy, my best friend Hunter, his girlfriend Kristen, and myself all decided to put apart our savings and get a getaway cabin located in the North Dakota woods. Hunter had finished his first 2 years of criminology, and I had finished my first 2 years of social work. For all of these new strides made in our lives, we all sought to have a fun weekend of drinking, smoking, and playing a few rounds of Monopoly. Now, none of the four of us had any real camping experiences, especially in a state far away from our own hometown. The closest experience any of us had had was the one time my father took my siblings and I to a cabin in the Smoky Mountains. Julian, who I still consider the love of my life after an amazing 4 years together, loved being outdoors, but never sleeping on the hard ground. All of this called for a cabin. One we aimed to be located in the middle of nowhere and far from home, mostly to avoid human contact. We had left on Thursday evening, knowing we would want to arrive early enough to the cabin, seeing as the owner mentioned to be there by noon. Something else you should know is that for the long drive, Julian and myself split the driving while Hunter and Kirsten occupied the back seat of the car. This will be important to remember for later. A rule was that as long as we were driving, someone needed to stay awake to keep the driver alert so we didn't run off the road. That being said, Julian and I never slept a peep from the moment we left my driveway to the moment that we pulled off onto the dirt road that leads to the cabin. To this day, I could not tell you how we found it or even where it's at. Not that I'd ever go back. I can tell you that after turning off the interstate, we drove for over an hour on back roads with the help of Google Maps. These back roads taking us through no civilization except a small community with a gas station and, for some odd reason, a pole barn. Eventually, the road took us to a gravel drive that within itself must have been 2 hours. I'm not entirely sure how Hunter booked this place, nor did I ask because I never felt the need to know. The cabin itself was actually rather nice. When we pulled up, it was surrounded by trees to the point hardly any light could break through the limbs. Ironically enough, it was like a scene from a horror film. Pulling in, on the front, and the only porch, was a fair enough man. I had spoken early with him on the phone, so when he introduced himself, I knew right off he was the owner. He was rather quick about all the details. Simply to clean after ourselves, that we were responsible for our own food, and that we'd be held responsible for any and all damages. On top of that, he mentioned that reception was a no-go out here, as was hunting, which was also ironic, but we didn't hunt anyways. After that, he left. The layout of the cabin was simple enough. The entrance brought you into the living room with a large sitting area, fireplace, and even a poker in the corner. I remember that specifically because I couldn't help but question how it was oddly standing out. A hallway broke from the living room with an archway to the right, which took you into a kitchen and a dining room all crammed into one. At the end of the hall was a back door that took you out to a jacuzzi. Before that, the back door, right across from another, there were 2 doors that led into 2 separate bedrooms. Julian and I took the one on the right, and Kirsten and Hunter took the one on the left. Another key factor behind this story: throughout the day, we spent a large amount of time hiking, playing board games, and drinking. Later into the night, we all spent time in the jacuzzi, continuing our drinking and laughing. It was around 11:30 when Julie and I went to bed. Now both bedrooms were designed the same: a large queen bed, personal bathrooms, and windows that overlooked the woods. It's almost weird how much you can remember after relaying the events countless times in your head to try to remember any parts you may have missed. Now, if you recall back on that, Julian and I hadn't slept a peep for more than 24 hours and had been drinking. You can see where we crashed, and through the first night the events occurred that we wouldn't have noticed them. It wasn't until the arguing war between Hunter and Kirsten erupted the following morning did Julian and I decide to get out of bed to see what the fuss was about. What we hadn't expected was to find Kirsten swarming in tears and packing all of her belongings, insisting that we leave then and now, while Hunter tried to convince her otherwise. My first reaction was to believe that an argument had occurred and she wanted to cut the trip short, which I obviously opposed, having spent good money and gas to make it this far. It wasn't until then did Hunter and Kirsten share a look at what had happened over the night. From what I was told, all was normal at first, but at around 3 a.m., Kirsten woke up with an odd feeling in her stomach. She wasn't sure what caused her to wake up, and as she described it, it was a gnawing feeling in her gut that made her freeze still. Now, from the position she woke up in, her face was looking towards Hunter's, who was still sleeping at the time. She presumed, then, that perhaps the heat of his breathing on her face was what disturbed her sleep, but the gnawing feeling kept on. Behind her was the bedroom window, aiming out towards the woods. To this day, Kirsten thanks the lucky stars that she woke up, Hunter, rather than turn around and face the opposite direction of his heavy breathing. A dangerous move within itself, but better than her second option. From that point, Hunter carried with what transpired that night. When Kirsten woke him up, asking him to stop breathing down his neck, he was very groggy. It was for this reason that he had second-guessed what he thought he saw, but as his vision cleared, he knew what he was looking at. As Kirsten put it, he went white as the moonlight shining in behind her. According to Hunter, when he woke, his eyes didn't fall on Kirsten, as they usually would have, but the window. The split second he woke up, he swore he could have seen hands and a dark face pressed up against their window. When he realized what he was looking at, he woke up immediately, but by then the figure was gone. He at first wanted to put it off as a dream, but he saw what filled him with fear. 2 handprints pressed against the bedroom window. His suspicion that someone had been watching them as they slept came true. It was at that very moment a large pounding came at the door, which was set right out between our bedrooms. The pounding was relentless, almost like he was trying to break through the door to get inside. Kirsten, who had run into the closet, sat there for 30 minutes. Then the knocking just kept coming, while Hunter stood by the bedroom door with his body weight pushed up against the creaking wood. When the pounding finally stopped, Hunter assumed he had given up and turned back around, only to find him standing back at the window. He then raised his hand and did a wave with his index finger, as if he were daring someone to come forward. After that, he turned and skipped, yes, I do mean skipped, back into the woods. I thought they were joking when they told me the story at first. I'm sure that was more due to me not seeing Julian sleeping through this. I hardly sleep, so when I do, I crash hard. But Julian was always a light sleeper. The alcohol and lack of sleep had apparently changed that last night. Kirsten, who was still in mayhem over the event, really wanted to go home. However, the 3 of us all insisted on playing through the last night, and that one of us would stay guard. Any idea who that would be? Yep, the nocturnal one. The rest of the day went by fine, but none of the substances were touched. I'm not sure if it was because we were all fighting hangovers from the previous night, or if the paranoia had really struck with everyone. By the time 9 o'clock had hit, Kirsten and Hunter grew tired from having a hard night before, and to calm Kirsten's nerves more, we offered her and Hunter our room for the remaining night. Now, I did agree to keep watch, but I will say I am a very protective boyfriend, especially over Julian, so I intended to keep watch from our room while he slept. When we had gone to bed ourselves, I sat at the top of the bed with my back against the headboard. Julian laid his head on my thigh when going to sleep, something he would do whenever he got nervous or had one of the high night terrors, so I would play with his hair until he fell back asleep. I'm not sure when I dozed off, but when I woke up, the room was pitch black. I found it odd at first because I remember very specifically that this room had the moonlight casting through the night. When I looked towards the bedroom window, I saw a dark figure with the outline of a man. When I made eye contact, he drew back and ran towards the forest line. I raced over towards the window, causing Julian to fall from my thigh and wake up. When he realized the adrenaline pumping through me, he immediately jumped off the bed and ran across the hall to our friend's room, shutting the door behind him. Now, I know how that may seem, but you have to understand this. Julian and I had different lives. I wouldn't say I was upraised as the most straight person. I was abused for a large amount of my life, which only increased when I came out. I also have 5 older brothers who were relentless. In other words, I don't scare easy, and I don't take anyone's crap, especially if I feel like my friends were in danger. I had told Julian previously, before he fell asleep, that at any sign of trouble, run into Hunter and Kristen's room, barricade the door, and tell them to close the blinds. So he did. When I stepped up to the window, I had assumed the man had left. I could hardly see as it was, but it wasn't until I saw, thanks to the moonlight, a head pop out from just behind the tree line. I simply lost it. I threw my bedroom door open, stormed to the living room, and grabbed the steel poker from the fireplace. I'm not sure what pushed me to do what I did next, but as I said, I'm protective of my friends. I raced down the hall, stomping on purpose so the others knew of my exact position. When I got to the back door, I practically kicked it open, stepped outside, and in my loudest, most threatening voice I screamed, "Who do you think you are?" At this point, he stepped out from the tree line, stood perfectly still, started to skip towards me, just as Hunter had explained. At this point, I raised the poker high and demanded to know what it wanted. That's when he stopped, tilted his head, and yelled back in the most notorious voice I have ever heard. "To get inside, of course." It was then he ran. And when I say ran, I mean full-on dead sprinted to the point that my first reaction was to turn around and head straight back for the door. Now, as I mentioned before, I can't run, so when I got back inside and shut the door, he was already pushing on the door, trying his hardest to get in, while screaming profanities at the top of his lung. It was then that I got my first and only glimpse of his face. He was missing at least 30% of his teeth, his hair was scraggly and fell all over, and his eyes were surrounded by dark circles. I couldn't tell you exactly what he said, but it was along the lines of breaking in and tearing us ugly faggots all apart. As I said, I'm protective of my friends. So when he broke through my hold on the door and took his first step inside, I went apeshit unlike I ever had before. With clean, swift movements, I continuously slammed the poker left and right across this man's face. Now I know most people would have probably just more than likely stabbed the man with the end, but when I felt like our lives were in danger, my only reaction was to attack, and to attack hard. Through my relentless smacking on this old man, I heard something loud smack the floor and crack that caused him to yell in pain. It was after this that he turned and bolted for the woods. I tried to pursue him as well, but I lost him. When I came back inside, I saw what had fallen on the floor causing him to run. A large black butcher knife. I'm assuming the clack was me breaking his hand and him dropping the knife on the floor. Something I didn't realize he even had. I sat outside for the rest of the night, Hunter joining me after the commotion, but he never did return. We did file a police report over the incident and were given a full refund, but so far nothing seems to have come of it. So, to the homophobic man in North Dakota woods preying on people at any given chance you get, I hope you enjoyed the damage to your hand, face, and God knows where else. I hope you never see anything like that again, because if I ever feel threatened like that again, I'll more than likely stab you rather than beat you. Thanks for listening to these allegedly true, creepy camping stories. That last one was really a doozy. It was probably one of the creepiest camping stories I've read in a long, long time. If you have a story you would like to share in a future video, be sure to submit your story at swampdweller.net or the email you can find in the description down below. I'd love to share your story with everyone here in the swamp. It's stories like yours that keep this channel going. If you enjoyed these stories, please hit that like button, as it helps me out a lot. And if you can, let me know you made it to the very end of this video by commenting, "Fluffy Elephant." Let's just confuse everybody who doesn't make it to the end, because why not? I'll see you guys soon with another creepy video.